Thank you so much, Luc, for taking out the time today. As I mentioned earlier, you're our fourth guest on the podcast. It's a new podcast we're starting to highlight the stories of different educators in Canada and around the world. Um, Educators have played a big role in my life, and I feel like they don't get enough credit for the work that they do. And so I'm hoping to use this platform to share more stories and learn more about the different stories of educators. To start us off, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your work before becoming an educator. Tell us a little about the early days when you were growing up. I'd love to hear about your background and where you started.
Okay, that's yeah, absolutely. First of all, it's an absolute honor and privilege to be here today. I'm really looking forward to this. Like I said, I did do a little bit of research to see sort of who you were and what this might look like, and so far very impressed with the person that you are and the work that you're doing. So uh, that's why I agreed, and I'm actually excited to be here to share with you today. So on my end, yeah, so I grew up, I guess the best way to describe it is just the most fortunate sort of circumstances. That typical. If you watch any '80s movies, the with the typical teen angst at the time, and which was really not founded on much. Life was a little too good, really. Um, but so fortunate to have come from a strong family with strong family values, um, just enough where the influence became to become a teacher. Yes, my dad was a teacher, and a very well liked and respected teacher. So that for sure must have played a role. However, it was you know my experience in school was that I was a very average student. So my interests were in fun with my friends and everything that entails. So that was really and just getting by in school. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was smart enough to get decent grades. I do believe this was back in the day before any sort of diagnosis of ADHD. But I am certain that my teachers back then had I would have definitely had that diagnosis. I
Yeah.
could not sit still for very long. So I believe that as a teacher, that helped me understand those students for whom sitting for long periods of time um, is difficult. And if you want to get student engagement, you got to find ways to engage those students.
Yeah.
So in that sense, my school, I never forced myself very hard. I just got by because then my parents left me alone. And at the same time, teachers were satisfied. So always average, class average was usually my mark.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of use that to my benefit to push students, I believe, in my teaching career, where I said, no. Like, there's more to you than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I would have had educators, and I wish even my parents would have pushed me a little harder because I was never pushed. I was never fully challenged. And as a teacher, I refused to allow those students to coast in my classes. No, especially the ones who had something more to give. So I believe that was an influence in my becoming a teacher as well.
No, I love that, and I like how you've taken that experience of you being a student at an early age, and you as a teacher, that's something you've implemented and you lead with, which I think
Yeah.
is so important. I'm curious to learn, were there any like teachers or educators or people in your life at an early age that you remember or you sort of look back and are inspired by or think about even in your work today?
Absolutely, absolutely. So even as I was teaching, I was always looking at the principles to learn. Like once, if ever I went that direction, what kind of school leader would I be? And so that's, and I'm now recognizing that I've always been that way. So when I was a student with the teachers, I was always sort of, I was thinking, okay, if I was a teacher, would I do things that way or this way, or
Mm,
what would I not do? And I had some fabulous teachers who, and again, they were the ones who did challenge me. They said, you know what, Luke, I think you got more to give here. So I had some who went above and beyond and who cared for students beyond just the mark. They,
Mm.
it was the teachers who cared about the whole person, the
Yeah.
student and everything that they have to offer, and who were able to go and get that from students. So those were the teachers who inspired me. I can name you a whole bunch, but at the end of the day, the characteristic I admire the most are those teachers who created a connection with students, got to know their students, know their story, and then from there got them to excel,
Yeah.
or to go to their comfort zones, if you will. So yeah.
It makes sense. Makes sense. Obviously, as I was doing my research, something I came across was how you're a champion for strengths-based education, right? I'm curious to learn what does strengths-based education even mean for someone that doesn't know what that is, um,
Right.
and how does that actually apply in a classroom or in an education setting?
Right. Okay. So, I mean, those are the technical terms, right? Where we talk about strength-based education, or we talk about, growth mindset, which,
Yeah.
so to me, that's all part and parcel of the ability to engage students. So, in order to engage students, you have to know your students.
Mm.
And to me, so talk about strength-based, it means you got to know the strengths of your students, and you build on those strengths, because students work from a level of motivation, right? If they're motivated to share, motivated to grow, motivated to learn,
Mm.
um, you know then you will get more out of them. So focus on their strengths, like, hey, what are you good at? If you're good at speaking and explaining yourself orally, then give that student the chance to, rather than pen to paper, write an essay on something, like, let's talk, explain to me what you. So it's building momentum for the student so that they feel good, because, hey, I'm using my strength here to share my knowledge. And so that's what it comes from, and that fits in perfectly with growth mindset,
Yeah.
where like, it's okay, so you're good at this. So rather than saying, hey, let's point out the negatives, or it's like, okay, so if you're good at this, then how can you also become good at this? And that's where, it's this question of yet. You don't know how to do this yet, but
Yeah.
as a teacher, I'm going to help you get there as best as I can. So that's really what strength based is to me.
Yeah.
And the way, if you tie that into the growth mindset that's necessary, that a student needs to excel, then that's the way I go with that, is I
Yeah.
build those two together, and to go get the most out of you can from the students.
No, makes sense. And I really love this idea of, yeah, you're not good, but yet, right? And there's always opportunity to grow, as you mentioned. And
Mhm.
even seeing, allowing students to, like, measuring success through a lens of progress versus at a specific point in time. So I really
Yeah.
like that. I just going back to your story a little bit. I'm curious to
Mhm.
learn. Obviously, you mentioned your dad being an educator. At what
Yeah.
point did you know that you wanted to pursue this path? Was it university? Was it like at a specific age? Curious to
I know.
learn.
I could tell you the exact day that it happened.
Okay.
um, so what happened was, like I said, I was never challenged, never really pushed. I was going through life, swimmingly. Having a good time. And so much so that my buddies, I wasn't always taken seriously, right? Because I like to have fun more than I liked anything else. And so I, I vividly, I had this grade 12 French teacher, and he was tough on me. He didn't particularly like me. And so we had this major project to do, and we had to present in front of the class. And normally, I would have goofed off. I would have, written something up
Mm.
the night before, and just sort of ad-libbed my way through it, you know. But instead, I ended up with a topic that I knew nothing about. And then when I discovered what it was, I was like, oh my gosh, and it was about domestic violence, I believe.
Yeah.
And as I was doing the research and learning about this, wait a second, this isn't right. And so the day of our presentation, when the teacher called my name to come up and present, my buddies were like, elbowing each other, going, "Oh, this will be good, can't wait to." And instead, something else clicked, and I started speaking passionately, and I had researched, and I gave such a great presentation that even my teacher, who again, he was not a big fan, I remember looking at his expression. He was like, so surprised that I finished, and I sat down on my desk, and that was the day I said, "This is what I want to do for a living. I have so much to offer here, and so that was a turning point for me. It was a turning point in the way I wanted my friends to perceive me, in the way I wanted teachers to perceive me, in the way I want to be sort of understood, that I like to have a good time, but man, I've got things to share here, and I've got things to say, and I want to help people."
No,
So all that
yeah.
combined together.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story. I could definitely also relate to it in a different way. Something I think a lot about is like where passion stems from, right? Like
Yeah.
when working with a lot of young people, I'm sure you've experienced this. A lot of them ask you like, how do I figure out what I'm passionate about? And
Hmm.
I've always, just looking back, I've taken this approach of like passion is not necessarily something that you start with, but is
Hmm.
something that is an outcome. And so when you talk about that presentation,
Yeah.
you becoming passionate about this topic. It's not, you were not passionate about domestic violence at the very start when you got that
No.
topic, but when you were given that opportunity to explore something, given some constraints, and you
Mhm.
spend all this time, it's something that you developed, and it's really just inspiring to hear that turning point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That contributed to most of my teaching. So I spent, my first part of my career, 8 years teaching at the junior high level, which I loved, and because there's a certain kind of energy there that comes from that. Um, and then the bulk of my sort of real sort of passion came through was through high school. When I taught after that for a dozen years, if not more, in high school, social sciences area, social justice, and I brought students. I used to do trips where we would bring students to downtown Toronto,
wow.
to experience homelessness, and to work at a shelter, to sleep at a shelter actually, and to sort of expose students to that, and what it means, that, and how can that change them, and how can that have them want to have an impact in their communities. On top of that, it led me to I ended up leading 5 trips uh, to Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Peru, where I
Oh,
got to travel with students to really go and have an impact, and to see the world beyond the walls of our classrooms here in
yeah.
Canada, and understand how to have an impact, and see that we do have a responsibility. We are, like I said, I grew up in that perfect sort of home. Rather than sort of live in that comfort, I'm like, no, man, we have a responsibility with this, and we have a way that, and so anyway, so that's where I spent sort of this transformative part of my career, was really when I sought student engagement through social engagement. So through seeing how they can contribute to the world in a better way. Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell how passionate you are about that. Even at the start, before we start recording, you mentioned that, right? And I'm curious to
Mhm.
learn why. Like you obviously talk about, you reflect upon when you were young, growing up in quote unquote perfect home,
Yeah.
and you acknowledge that privilege and are like you have a
Mhm.
sense of responsibility. But how do you, like, it's not everyone has that. Like why
Yeah.
is that so important for you? And yeah, like I'm just curious to learn more.
Yeah. I what there is kind of an interesting part to that story, is so I had been teaching again. You know, I was in my mid 20s,
Yeah.
and I think you can relate. when my fellow colleagues who were in their 40s were saying, well, Luke, when you're principal, so, well, what do you mean when I'm principal? And it was like written to them, it was foregone conclusion that was my path. And I sort of wondered about that, why are you imposing that on me? Because I just want to become a really good teacher. Like that, my passion is to become the best teacher I can be,
Yeah.
and you're already, putting me behind in an office somewhere. That's all right. Anyway, so what ended up happening is that I doubled down on the teaching part. I was offered a principal's position in a board, and then I was also within the same 48 hours, I was offered also a position to teach high school. And I thought, I want to teach high school. I want to get more experience. At that interview, they said, okay, the only position right now that we have would be to teach religion, right? And I'm thinking, okay. And so in an interview, your response is, oh, of course, I would love to teach religion, and in the back of my head, I'm thinking, teach religion in high school? What am I getting myself into? I
Yeah.
can't, But what ended up happening is I ended up spending, again, the next 12, 13 years teaching students social sciences. I taught the grade 12 Canadian World Issues course, which I
Nice.
loved, the world religions courses. And what I found is that I learned from the students right from my first 2 weeks in. Like I fell in love with teaching high school students, because I think this is where you can relate. 15-year-olds, right? Because I believe you're,
Yeah.
15-year-olds have that burning desire there. Now I'll call it a spiritual side, not religion. I'm talking about a spiritual side where that sort of concept of existentialism, like there's something, there's more to me than there's this, right? There's
Yeah.
more to this world than just what I'm taking from it. So there's an instinctive piece from students. So I fed off of that and their desire to learn more, to want to then make it. So they were the ones who were teaching me, like, hey, we should do this and we can do this kind of social justice project. And so I learned from students in my first couple of years, and I just grew from that. And I developed my passion from seeing the passion of other students who
Students.
would read up on it. Anyway, so that's where I got into it. I led social justice groups at schools with fellow teachers who are just as passionate as I was. But again, they will share with you, it's the students come to us saying, hey man, like I'm just learning about this, and this is brutal. I can't believe this is happening in our world, and we can't just let this go, Mr. Renaud. What can we do? And
Yeah.
then I would work with them, and so that's where we go.
No, I love that. I love that. I could definitely, yeah, relate to being a 15-year-old and asking
Yeah.
myself those difficult questions of like, I'm sure there's more to life than just this. And
Mhm.
and if it wasn't for the opportunities in school to explore that and actually take some of those questions into something actionable, I wouldn't have been where I am today, right? And so
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
I, I
yeah,
definitely appreciate you mentioning that, but also you taking a different approach where you talk about how you learned from your students,
yeah,
and you derived your passion from them, which I think, I mean, it feels like a given, but it's hard to actually practice that, right? We
yes,
were having another conversation, and someone mentioned about how one of the advice they got was it's not about you when you're in a classroom, but it's really about your students, right?
yes.
And so it sounds like you actually, yeah, practice that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious to learn, obviously, because we just mentioned talked about social justice and having a
hmm
responsibility larger than yourself. I'm curious to learn,
hmm
what's your take on our current world and dynamics that are going on, right? In terms of,
Right.
there's so much change we're experiencing, whether it's climate, whether it's social media and new technologies, whether it's politics, there's
Yeah.
all these different dynamics. And also, like, I came from a religious background as well, and
Right. Right.
religion was a big part for me, not only for the religion itself, but things like community, things like values. How do you navigate all
Yes.
these different changes we're experiencing, especially in an age where it feels like there's so much pressure externally with social media and so forth when working with young people?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I mean, that is the question, right? That is the, you know, where are we going now? And what the foundation, I believe strongly, is that, um, you know, you talk about any one of us, and any one of us could feel overwhelmed with all the issues going on in the world. I mean, the abundance of information, everything going on with from elections to wars to, um, and what we need to be very conscious of is that you got to provide a sense of hope versus despair, right? I always compare hope and despair. If we're working at our job, I believe that our responsibility is to provide a sense of hope, and so focus on, okay, so what is the difference? What's the change that you can make? Regardless of your circle of influence, whether it be like, it doesn't mean you're Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi, where you're getting, affecting genocide, or liberating your country after X number of years of British rule. You can still have an impact. So what is, climate change is a major concern of young people. Okay, what you do is ask them, what is one change that you can bring? What is, and your circle of influence, where can you go with this? And so you always have to provide students with a sort of a window of an opportunity for them to give back, an opportunity for them to affect change. So what does that look like? I will agree that with anybody who says it's getting more and more difficult. It is. I'm not questioning that. And if you want to add into all that, like, where are we going? And if I was to start fresh now, you know, there, we can't hide from the reality of AI,
Yeah.
right? And that will have an impact on our schooling,
Yeah.
on school systems. Huge. So, you talk about where is education going, where are we going with that? And, I believe that, you give students a sense of hope and belief that all technologies throughout history have actually helped.
Yeah.
All technologies, a lot of teachers, a lot of educators are very afraid of technological advances. People thought that, well, what's the point of school once Google, you could say, and before that, spell check was a big issue.
Yeah.
Before that, the first teachers who allowed calculators in class thought that was the most ridiculous thing. Like, what are we doing? So, but every time, new technologies have advanced, we've found ways to use it to our advantage to help people grow and develop other competencies and other things. So we can't be afraid. But again, I believe that where we're heading in education, rather than being afraid of what's coming, let's use it to address, the issues of our day, and so provide students with that belief that they can have an impact,
Yeah.
and allows teachers that vulnerability to say, man, I'm even concerned about my job. Like,
Yeah.
we're all concerned about what are their jobs going to look like in the future, but let's go together here. Let's see what options are there for us. And so I just to add to all that, I have two older daughters.
Yeah.
And, believe it or not, so I have three daughters. One who's here at this school with me in grade 10. But the other two are actually in teachers college. So
Okay.
they're in their mid 20s. And so what are they doing? How do I feel about my daughters being in teachers college, meaning they're entering into this profession that's ever changing, and I'm being asked, how do you feel about that? And I'm feeling, honestly, optimistic. And
Yeah.
so to come back to your original question, optimism. So hope over despair is really where we need to keep putting our energies and our focus.
I love that. I like that you're taking that approach of optimism, embracing the technology, embracing the changes that we're experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not something that you just say, but I mean, you're seeing that with your daughters, right? They're in teachers college, and
Yeah.
you're encouraging them to pursue that path. So I completely love
Hmm.
that. A question I had was, you talked earlier about how you were really passionate about, teaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a point where you were offered a principal's role versus a teaching
Yeah.
role, and you decided to pursue teaching for a couple more years.
Yeah.
But obviously now you're in this position of leadership.
Yes. Yes.
um Curious to learn, I guess, how has that changed for you in terms of your approach? Like, what's been the main difference, and yeah, how do you feel now that you're in that leadership role?
Right. I'm again. I'm very. I love my role.
Yeah,
I love my job. Um, and I think that that is in line with the timing that I chose. Um, so I guess I want to make sure I'm answering the question properly. So you're asking me like how do I, sorry, what,
yeah. How do
just
you
to
how do
sort of
yeah how
re-clarify.
I guess how do you feel now that you're in that leadership role versus teaching, and
Right.
and yeah, what's
Right.
that experience been like for you so far?
Yeah. Um, so I've always, so again, as I was teaching, I would always sort of see what brings out the best in me as a teacher. What kind of principal, vice principals, what kind of leadership helps me be the best teacher that I can be? And as a principal, I can guarantee you, you could ask any staff. This is my second, I'm in my 10th year. At this school, we have 750 students.
Yeah,
So, whatever, 50-ish teachers, and they'll all share with you that I view my role as a principal, and that's where the word servant leadership comes in. Is I ask them, what can I do to help you be the best teacher you can be, right? I don't view, like, because it's middle management, right?
yeah,
Principal's job is middle management, because we have pressures from ministry, which is then our superintendents or our leadership team at the board level, that is coming down saying you need to do this.
yeah,
Here's math scores need to be there. We need to these new initiatives. You're not allowed to allow cell phones in schools.
yeah,
And so we got all these ministry, and then at the same time, I've got to my job. I still believe that with that, more important is helping teachers, because they're the ones who are with the students in the classroom,
yeah,
engaging every single day with them. So I'm asking teachers, like, what can I do? Like, I have their backs. They know I have their backs with challenging parents. So I just view, the reason why I love my job is because I come here every day knowing that I'm helping 50, 60 educators be the best that they can be, and helping them problem solve, helping them help students. Because at the end of the day, all 742 students that are students at this school, I have their well-being at heart,
yeah,
every single one of them.
yeah.
And so when my first role in a awesome elementary school, I was principal. There's only 200 students at the time, and I knew by October I knew every single student by name,
Wow.
and I could, people were asking, how do you know, how do you know everybody? Because it's important.
Yeah,
It's because they matter, and you got to let your students know that they matter.
matter.
Um, so that's why I love my job, and that's why I got into it. I thought maybe I can have a little bit bigger influence in my circle of influence, if you want to call it that, to help other teachers sort of, you know, get into that mindset that our role is to help every single student who comes to us, to help them grow and nurture them and care for them. And that's at the end of the day, it matters.
Yeah, I can tell even just by how you're talking, like how passionate you are,
Mhm.
and it's something that you practice, right? That teacher in you
Mhm.
is still there, and the
Yeah,
fact that
yeah,
you take this approach of servant leadership, it just goes to show, um, yeah, how important it is, and even you saying like remembering every student's name, and making sure that you make students feel like they matter is extremely
yeah,
important, and
yeah,
so inspiring to hear. One last question I had was, obviously
yeah.
you've been in the space for X many years.
Hmm.
You've been in the teacher role, now in leadership. Um,
Yeah.
Curious. to learn if you had to go back to year one,
Mm.
when you were, just starting off, what, I guess, advice would you give your younger self that just started out?
Well, my advice um, remains pretty consistent, um, which is let every student in your care, regardless of your role in education, let every student know that they matter to you, that you care about who they are. And I didn't always do that. I mean, I speak as if and I think it was always instinctive to do that. But so in that respect, it's just a reminder. There were times where it was difficult. There were times where, uh, and every educator needs to know, starting out, that there is going to be some challenging times. There are going to be times you're going to question yourself. There are going to be parents who are not going to appreciate your approach. There are going to be students who won't appreciate your approach. There's going to be colleagues who are going to push back and say, no, 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 that's not our role. And so it would have been if I was to start back, it would have been to have the courage right from the get-go to not be afraid to have those hard conversations. Because one thing I've learned in role of in leadership role is that there are for sure going to be difficult conversations to have. I have them every day. And I feel for my colleagues who are somewhat discouraged. I never for me, ever use the term burnout. But when I see them sort of at wit's end, or they're counting their days already for, eh, you know, retirement, and which one thing I promised myself I would never do, and I never have. So it would be at an earlier age, I was afraid of hard conversations. I wish I would be more willing to have the courage and the self-confidence, even though I'm brand new in a job, have courage and self-confidence that if you're doing it for the right reasons, for your students, for your teachers, for whatever, like, you're doing it for the right reasons, have confidence, and do not be afraid to defend that, and have the courage to speak up, and to you know to be willing to have those challenging times, because there will be challenging times. To hope or wish that there won't be, or there won't be that difficult parent, or there won't, forget it.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong profession, because
Yeah.
there will be. Yeah.
No, I love that, and you couldn't have, yeah, ended on a better note. Like, really, just, yeah, even all the stories that you shared, I feel so
Mhm.
energized knowing that we have educators and leaders like yourself that do care, and regardless of, all the different challenges that you face, you show up every day to make sure students feel like they matter, and you're willing to have hard conversations, whether it's with parents, whether it's with teachers, whether it's with
Mhm.
staff, and yeah, I just feel really inspired, really energized from this conversation. A lot to think about, a lot I've taken a bunch of notes, and so yeah, I appreciate you taking out the time. Any final words or thoughts before we end?
No, thank you for the work you're doing. I hope you keep going with this. Again, I wouldn't have gotten into this job if I didn't believe in the voice and the strength of people. And I do like your word of leaders of today
Yeah.
as opposed to tomorrow, right? So like, what can you do today? And I love that you're on that path, that idea. So I'm not going to make any more reference to you being a young person, because you are the person you are at this age that you are, and I believe that today you're having an impact, and I'm loving the work you're doing, and I wish you the best, and I hope you keep sharing this with today, knowing that it'll continue to have impact tomorrow. So thank you very much for this opportunity to share, and I'm very happy. I hope that we stay connected some way.
No, 100%. Yeah, definitely gonna keep gonna. I feel like even just you saying that at the end, it's like I wish I heard that more, even especially when I was
Yeah,
starting out. So I
yeah,
really appreciate that, and yeah, I just feel very energized, and thank you for just sharing so authentically. It really means a lot.
yeah. No, thank you very much for this opportunity.